Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco in a now viral post on Instagram from back in June, where he endorsed Donald Trump for president. Now, shortly after Trump was convicted in his New York hush money trial. That video, Bianco in his uniform, eliciting calls from Superintendent of Public Instruction Tony Thurmond for an investigation and a debate.
Making an endorsement in a state taxpayer-funded uniform and badge would seem to violate the rules that we have. If the sheriff wants to be governor, I think that there ought to be a debate.
Well, with more, we are joined by Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco and California's Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurmond. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being here and taking the time out. We made it happen. Good to have you. We're going to start with that very incident. I'll start with you, Superintendent Thurmond. Yes. Where does that investigation stand? Have you gone to the Attorney General of California, Rob Bonta, to open an investigation into the sheriff?
My understanding is that there are some who are looking into it, but again, we're here because I was just struck that you'd have someone who would say that they want a felon in the White House, and as many of the issues that we're talking about have to deal with public safety, just a concern that someone would advocate for a person who tried to overthrow our government, and in doing so, cause the harm of many people, including police officers. And so that's how we got here, and it's a big concern.
Sheriff, I see you're wearing the uniform today. Was that a bit of a...
It actually is. There are many things that are concerning to me that he just said, but the biggest one was him coming online and trying to somehow, truly, it was him get a little bit of fame for his governor run off of a viral video. And the disturbing thing for me was that we have the person in charge of education in our state that failed to educate himself, do his homework about whether or not it was true or not that I violated some law, and then he went on national or local news saying that I did, and he repeatedly social media saying that I have violated these laws. So the truth of the matter is I did not. I have spoken to numerous investigators over the last 5 years because there's always people that don't know the law and they complain and they file complaints. I have spoken to local investigators and federal investigators, and regardless of what he thinks, the sheriff does not apply to that law or that rule, and I am exempt because I'm an elected official, and specifically the office of sheriff does not apply to that. A chief of police would, one of my employees would, and then a technical part of the law that of course he didn't educate himself on is that I am not considered an officer or an employee of the Sheriff's Department. I am the elected sheriff of Riverside County, and I am separate from the employees of the organization.
If I could, thoughts on that?
If I could,
and the fact that he's wearing the uniform today.
Again, anyone can make a mistake, but when the sheriff doubled down as an elected official to say that it's his badge, his uniform, he can do with it what he wants, I think it's disrespectful to the people who elect us. There are rules. It's not about whether or not you're elected or you're a rank and file officer. There are clearly established rules that say that public officials, elected officials, don't engage in politics when we are on the clock, when we are working. And that's all we were saying.
There are no laws that say that. And the fact that we're sitting here talking about things that are not true, and now I have told everyone, including yourself, that you are completely wrong. You have accused me of committing a crime multiple times on television and your social media. Anytime you want to fix it and apologize, I'll wait.
There is no open investigation into the sheriff.
My office doesn't have the power to do an investigation. We're reaching out to state agencies that can. And this is not the first time that this has happened. There's been a LA County sheriff who did the same thing, made a political endorsement in uniform, and he took it back. And you doubled down on it, and that just says a lot about
there are things like the Hatch Act and other things where you're not supposed to do official work.
So I will let people bury themselves as much as they want, and when it keeps getting worse and worse and worse, then I'll show you the letters. I guarantee you, if he complained, which I think he did, they won't tell me, they block out the address, but he got the same letter that they send me and say this is what we gave them, and it explains that the office of sheriff is different.
Let's talk about public safety, which you know a lot about. You do too as well, of course, but you as sheriff, you're very much against Prop 47. There is a ballot on the upcoming election in November to amend Prop 47, which for our viewers, a little refresher, that this reclassifies non-violent crimes from felonies to misdemeanors. And on the ballot this November will be Prop 36, which is the amendment to Prop 47.
Right.
Why is this the answer, in your belief, to solving the crime public safety issue?
This isn't the end-all answer, but we know from a public safety standpoint, and really the voters know, 80% of the population of California knows that Prop 47 has been the beginning of the end. Really was AB 109, but Prop 47 then started the ball rolling. The beginning of the end for public safety in California, whether you're talking about homeless, whether you're talking about drugs, whether you're talking about theft, all of those things drastically increased, and you can look and see the drastic increase since 47. Everyone knows what those consequences were going to be. We told the legislature what those consequences were going to be, and we've tried to get it fixed. We know now that we were 100% lied to by our state government, specifically our Attorney General, who happens to be the person he's endorsing for president now, and we were sold a bill of goods with the Safe Streets and Safe Schools initiative, which we know now had nothing to do with safe streets and safe schools. It was about decriminalization. It was about no accountability for criminal behavior, raising the limits of theft, no accountability for drugs. It should be a crime of what we have done with drugs and the homeless, in that we cannot get them into services now, and that was all taken away by Prop 47.
So this effort to reform Prop 47, now Prop 36, has been supported by some liberal Democrats, including the mayor of San Francisco, the mayor of San Jose. Do you support it?
First thing I want to say, just in correction, Sheriff, the legislature didn't pass Prop 47.
The people
of California did.
In an overwhelming vote.
But to that point, people are tired of having their cars broken into, their homes and their businesses. I myself have had 2 different times a car broken into, my daughter's car stolen. We do need accountability. And I've been on a lot of police ride-alongs. I come from a law enforcement family. I was raised by 2 police officers. My brother's retired police. And as I talk to officers, they talk about arresting the same person twice in the same night. Yes, there has to be reform. We're taking a look at Prop 36. I'm working with a lot of legislators right now as we speak to create real consequences for those who commit retail theft, to go after those rings who are helping to steal the stuff and then sell it again on eBay and other places. We need change, but just locking people up is not the solution. We need intervention programs. And as governor, I would start a campaign immediately to put 2,000 more officers on the streets of California to help keep our communities safe, and to build intervention programs to also make sure that we have a way to prevent the crime.
So do you back Prop 36?
I'm taking a look at it right now as we speak.
You don't know yet.
But I support legislation that creates more accountability for anyone who commits a crime.
His entire time in the legislature was supporting criminals. His first bill was a benefit to a criminal, not the victims. You gave more credits, time credits for credit time served, so they didn't have to pay court-imposed fines and costs. That was your first bill. You did it. Are you going to deny it? Are you going to deny it?
Let him answer.
He repeatedly voted for soft on crime policies. He voted for the sanctuary state law. He voted to remove the enhancements, the automatic enhancements for repeat criminals. He voted to remove the enhancements for criminals convicted of gun crimes, while wanting to make law-abiding gun owners criminals.
Go ahead and respond.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak. What is your vision for public safety? As I've said, I'll put 2,000 officers on the street. I'm working right now in real time with legislators to create more consequences and accountability for anyone who commits a crime, whether it be retail theft or anything. In my experience as an elected official, I've done more to help reduce violent crimes in the cities that I've represented, by building strong programs, working with law enforcement. What's your vision?
I think you just made that whole thing up, but
my record is clear.
I've spent 31 years in law enforcement, on the front lines of law enforcement, trying to keep people safe, arresting the same people over and over, while the people in Sacramento, repeatedly voted for soft on crime policies, making us less safe, more rights and benefits to criminals than actual victims.
How do you respond to that, Superintendent? I mean, what he's saying is that in the past, your proposals were soft on crime. How do you respond to that? You're talking about the future, but in terms of your past voting record.
I disagree with the blatant mischaracterizations that the sheriff is making. It sounds like you're making this personal. I asked you what your vision was for keeping our state safe. I haven't haven't heard you say that. You're looking for ways to attack my record that speaks for itself. Yes, I led programs that are record proven in the country for reducing violent crime in our communities, and I will continue to do that here in our state.
Let me ask you, you have made the official announcement to run for governor in 2026.
That's correct.
Why haven't you taken the time to formulate an opinion about Prop 36, because it is such a controversial and important ballot in November?
It's a very new measure that I'm taking a look at. Ultimately, the voters will decide if they're going to pass it or not. I've spent the last several weeks working on measures that I think are important to this state, including how do we give immediate consequences to those who commit crimes. Those bills are going to be passed any day now, and I've been working on that, as well as building programs to support some of our important needs in this state. Just yesterday, we launched a new campaign that's going to allow us to build 2 million more housing units in the state. I'm working on addressing homelessness and of course, crime and safety issues in the state. And so that's where I put my priority.
And these are housing units on public land, right? With
school districts.
School district plan, which is a whole nother.
Well, we're going to talk about education in our next break. So our conversation with Superintendent Thurman and Sheriff Bianco.
I have an education plan.
It will continue. We'll talk education when we come back. Stay with us.
And welcome back to Fox 7 News at 6. I'm Ellis Michelson.
And I'm Marla Tejas. Now back to our special debate. We turn to the issue of education. Earlier this month, as we reported right here on Fox 11, Governor Gavin Newsom signed Assembly Bill 1955. The controversial bill prohibits California school districts from notifying parents about a student's desire to change sexual orientation or gender identity. Proponents say the law protects LGBTQ plus students. Opponents, who have already filed a lawsuit challenging the law, say it violates the rights of parents.
Now back to our special debate between California Superintendent of Public Instruction Tony Thurman and Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco. So, Mr. Superintendent, since this is your purview, let's start with you. You support this. Why is it a good idea?
You know, I've worked on SB 1955, and here are the facts. Actually, it does nothing to block the rights of parents. It actually says that when there are any discussions that are going to take place about a child's sexual orientation, that conversation should happen between that child and their parent. We don't want government involved in making decisions about our children. Is that something that you'd want to see? I know you're going to speak against this matter, but actually what it does is it protects young people from being forcibly outed. And research shows that when you target LGBTQ plus students in this way, you propel them towards suicide. 40% of LGBTQ plus kids are experiencing or considering suicide. But when you do the opposite and you support them, they do better in school, they have better attendance, and it is just a misnomer for those who have said that this takes away parent rights. This actually reaffirms the rights that parents and their family should have to work on these issues together.
Sheriff Chad Bianco, I know you have a very different perspective on this.
Yes, I mean, since he took over this position, talking about mental health, 70% increase in mental health issues in high school, or I mean in school-aged children. So there's a huge problem there. And the good thing about talking to a cop, especially a leader of a law enforcement agency, is you absolutely have to get the truth from me. It is impossible for me, unless I want to be fired and removed, for lying. I can't lie as a cop. There's only one of us here that can do that. This bill is absolutely horrible. This bill is absolutely horrible, and it certainly takes away the rights of teachers to inform parents. And what it does is it prevents school districts from having their own rules and laws of saying that teachers will notify parents, or that a teacher can notify a parent. This took away that ability for schools to do that in the event we come up with a policy that says you can no longer talk to the students. This is an end-around, ridiculous law that, as a parent and as a grandparent, absolutely horrible. That there is no parent in the state that supports this.
His point is that students could be forcibly outed to parents who may not be ready for that, and that they could commit suicide as a result. You say what?
We can ifs forever. If we're talking about something that could happen, so we're going to pass a law and we're going to make some policy, that's not the role of government, not even close to the role of government.
Is it the role of government to interfere in the lives of families and their children and to tell them what they should and shouldn't do?
You just did that by passing 1955.
Do you agree or disagree? I just said that government should not be involved in the lives of our families, and that this is a decision that should get made between parents and their children. Do you agree or disagree?
You're absolutely right, which is why government should stay out of it.
And that's why I support this bill, because it keeps government out of it.
By putting government in.
And it keeps teachers teaching, which is their job.
We've heard from a lot of parents parents that say this really just muddies the water when it comes to my parental rights. When I drop my kid off at school, whatever that they choose to tell their teacher, that should be relayed to me. So that is their right as a parent. And you say?
The bill does not say that a teacher cannot engage in communication with the parent. It simply says that the district cannot require teachers to forcibly out a student who might be having questions about their sexual identity.
But if a student says, I want to be known, if I'm a female and I want to be known as the he pronoun now, isn't that what this law says? It prevents the child, or prevents the teacher from notifying the parent of that?
You know, teachers don't have the experience to make the decisions about who's LGBTQ plus or who isn't. You know, at what point do we expect teachers to start doing investigations about what students? We bring teachers in to help them support our kids to learn. And all this bill says is that when it comes to someone's sexual orientation, that's a personal matter that should be worked out between them and their family.
But there's so many other issues, like even a permission slip for a field trip you have to get a parent for, so why wouldn't this go to your parent?
Where would parents start? Would they call every time they heard a child use a pronoun? That doesn't mean anything about their sexual orientation. All it does is take away the right of a parent to be there, or a teacher to be a caring adult if the student needs someone to talk to. Teachers are some of our best mentors. You talked about counseling. If I could finish, you know, I brought the resources in so that we can have 10,000 more counselors in our schools so they can get help for the things that impacted them since the pandemic. Why would we take away the right of any caring adult to help a young person who's struggling with their sexual orientation or bullying or any issue?
If they've come out and this is what we're talking about in school, they're not coming out. They're not being outed. They're already outed. They've already outed themselves. We're just keeping it from their parents. Students don't have rights. Kids don't have rights. I was responsible for my kids. My kids didn't have rights. From a law enforcement perspective.
Kids have rights, really?
Parents are responsible for their children. Are you going to say that they're not?
Well, I think it's both, right? No?
Well, it depends so I probably misspoke and said, yes, they certainly have rights. They are U.S. citizens, they are humans, they have rights. But parents are responsible for their children.
And that they are their legal guardians.
We don't allow an 11-year-old to decide that he's going to be a dog and act like a dog all day long without the teacher saying,
how is that
I think we have a problem with your child and their pronouns and what they believe, and you have a right to know what's happening with your child.
I think we just heard a dangerous policy in how you view young people, that they don't have any rights, in comparing them to dogs. Most of the kids who've been forcibly outed, because they've called me and they've asked me to come to their schools, they have not outed themselves, but someone has decided that they should be outed. Again, that goes against their well-being and their support. And I think it's a reckless policy, and if you're going to be governor of the state,
we could keep talking about this forever, but let's go just more broadly in terms of education. Obviously, during the pandemic, we had learning loss. We had a lot of parents that were frustrated that kids didn't come back to school earlier.
We had the longest school closures in the nation.
So going forward, what is the plan in terms of ameliorating some of that learning loss and improving California schools?
There's no question our students, like adults, were impacted by the pandemic and mental health, and they're dealing with learning gaps that actually existed before the pandemic and got worse. Our state is better positioned than any others to help our kids bounce back. We're giving them extra tutoring, longer school time. We are spending $1 billion a year in arts education, which addresses many things, including our students' academics, reading coaches and specialists to make sure that our kids learn to read by 3rd grade. And we're working to make sure that we get 10,000 more mental health clinicians in our schools to help our kids. We're giving them free meals. You know, we spent 900 million, we fed 900 million families during the pandemic. You said that our schools were closed longer. We actually took the action to make sure that our schools could open safely so that people could be in school safe from COVID, so they could be learning. We got 1 million computers for our students. I worked on getting $8 billion for broadband to make sure our students can learn. Our schools closed, our kids didn't even have computers. And so I dug in there to make sure that we would get these resources for our kids. I hear you making, blame and platitudes, but I'm very interested if you have a real vision for serving the students of our state, because they need a great deal.
Let me interject and say that we have less than a minute. Sheriff, you have hinted at a run for governor in 2026. Are you ready to make that announcement tonight?
No, I'm the sheriff of Riverside County, and for the next several months, my goal is to make sure that Prop 36 is passed and not lied to the public. Apparently, he doesn't know either. But the public has to know that Prop 36 must be passed. And I've read what the Attorney General has now put out in the ballot for the descriptions. It's another lie. It's another Prop 47. We need to combat this.
Maybe 30 seconds on education. Your thought on what he just said?
Well, historically, he has been a social worker, not an educator. We are the worst in the country when it comes to education. We have the lowest literacy rate for adults. They celebrate 34% of our kids being grade level literate in math and 46% grade level literate in language arts, and they celebrate that. We spend more money per student than anyone in the country, and we are the bottom of the list when it comes to education. And now he wants to really waste $14 billion on 75,000 acres of school property. What I want to know, where this entire state needs to be fixed, how does a school have 75,000 acres of real property?
I can address that.
That is $14 billion
Real quickly,
that they have failed.
This will be the last word.
The school has failed to educate our kids, and they waste it spending money on property.
One correction for you, Sheriff. I spent 10 years working in our schools, just to be clear. You don't get to speak for what my career is, just like I wouldn't do that to you.
Your record does.
You are someone who has said you would support a president who wants to get rid of the U.S. Department of Education. That would take away resources for kids with disabilities and special education and low-income students. What would
it actually would. It puts it in the hands of the state.
Let me finish. What would you say
if it was truthful?
You know, I asked you if you had a vision for education. You didn't give us an answer. You just pointed a finger. I asked you, what's your vision for public safety? You didn't give us an answer. And so I'm sitting here saying I am running for governor, and one of my lead priorities is to build 2.3 million housing units. We are in a housing crisis, and it just so happens that our schools across the state possess 75,000 acres of land that can be developed upon. And schools have done this. They can use surplus property to build for their teachers and classified staff who cannot afford to live where they work. This is a significant opportunity for California communities, and I'm going to help lead it, and I'm going to help lead this state to address housing and homelessness and great paying jobs for Californians.
Superintendent Tony Thurmond, we thank you so much. Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco, thank you both for being here and taking the time out to do this.
And not everybody goes out of the echo chambers and has an actual conversation. So thank you very much, and we need more of that. So thanks for being here.
We'll be right back.